Michelle Feeney is a beauty industry luminary with over 40 years overseeing the launch and growth of some of the biggest brands in beauty. From Prescriptives to MAC, Creme de la Mer, Tommy Hilfiger Fragrance and Saint Tropez, Michelle has been responsible for predicting and driving industry trends, and her belief in doing things differently is legendary.
Taking all of that experience, Michelle now leads a team of mainly women with her own project of passion and purpose, the fragrance brand she started from her kitchen table, Floral Street. Now 6 years old, Michelle's drive for doing things differently is evident as every single part of the Floral Street story disrupts the fragrance industry status quo and was built from day one on sustainable business practices and the principles of new luxury, transparency, accessibility and authenticity.
Oh, welcome, Michelle. We're so
Thank
happy
you.
to have you here.
Wow, it's great to hear yourselves described like that.
Now, we're kicking off with asking you to share with us your shake the table moment.
Well, I think as a daughter of an Irish immigrant, I've constantly been shaking that table since I was little, actually.
Yeah.
But, my most recent, obviously, is Floral Street, where I saw a gap. That fragrance wasn't really speaking about sustainability at all, and all the packaging was wrapped in cello wrap. And I just thought, I can do this. I can, foolishly maybe, I thought I can start this fragrance brand in amongst all the ones that have all the budget to advertise and make a statement about the industry needing to change, and hopefully speaking to a new kind of customer, which would be, I call it an interested modern customer that can be 82 or 18. That is really interesting in the authenticity of a product, in the sustainability aspect of it. But always, my entire life has been in the beauty industry, so it's always not taking the beauty out of beauty.
Yeah.
So we all need to feel good about what we're using and buying, but at the same time, you can do that sustainably. So I think that's my kind of most recent shake, but I've had a series of shaking that table in New York and, along the way. And I guess it's part of my DNA, and part of my own philosophy is, if you're going to do something, why wouldn't you do it differently, and why wouldn't you do it with purpose?
Yeah.
Because when you say that, and we've been fortunate enough to be chatting for about 20 minutes before we started recording, and what kind of seeps out of you is bravery, I think. Because actually, when you've got to a pretty senior stage in your career to say, well, I just felt I needed to do something to show that you could do things differently. Like, some people would just be saying, I'm really happy. I've got fantastic share options. I've got a great life. I'm just going to kind of really enjoy myself. What got you to that moment? And you talked about a few moments of shaking the table. I guess there was probably a couple of those moments that led up to you thinking, I'm gonna start my own business and start Floral Street.
Do you know, I've never had a plan, and I've never applied for a job. And I've lived my life in this sort of, I guess you could call it brave, but you could call it crazy, but a sort of a free-spirited way that opportunity, the Americans have a phrase, there's no such thing as luck, it's preparation meets opportunity. And if you're emotionally prepped, it could be prepped, physically as well, but and an opportunity arises, and I am ready to jump and go and trust my gut that this is the direction I should go in. So yes, I did get, when I had, a vice president job in $1 billion company that I'd been part of the senior management team and building. I had amazing share options. I had a clothing allowance and a six-figure salary.
Oh
and then, I met my future husband, and he lived back in England, and he had a fledgling business, and my father had died, and I just thought, well, maybe it's time to move home, and everybody was like, you can't leave, my boss at the time said, what does this mean to me? Not congratulations, you've been a single mom, but now you're getting married, and, and it just felt the right thing to do. And I never I have a little thing in my head that I always, a question I ask myself, it's, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
And if I can live with that, I'll go. I'll jump. It's like if I can live with the worst possible scenario, I can think about a decision, then I go for it. And another interesting thing, I really, again, maybe foolishly, but I'm not really driven by money. I've had lots of times when I didn't have any, and I don't come from wealth, but I have to be driven by wanting to be a part of something and wanting to create something better and wanting the team around me to feel, really good. So that, I guess, has led me to do things differently and I'm not a tread water person.
It's like a restlessness.
Yeah. Even if I'm somewhere and I can see there's a better way of doing something, I can't help myself,
Wow.
But do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean.
But that always on sort of brain.
Yeah.
And also incredible amount of self-belief as well as being driven. Where do you think
On a good day.
On a good day. Yeah. Where does that self-belief come from, do you think? Was that kind of instilled in you from a young age by your parents?
It was actually.
Because you're quite a risk taker.
Yeah, I think they were too. You know, they got a shop and moved. They didn't have any experience, and they, to a different city, and I've been around that all my life. But also, I did grow up in Birmingham as part of an Irish community.
Yeah.
And I did Irish dancing and everything. And
can you still do it?
Sometimes, late at night after a few glasses of wine. But I just think it was always, you were always told, well, my mum actually said to me, don't ever go into a room and think anybody is actually better than you. And she didn't mean don't be arrogant. It's more like, I've met Prince Charles. I worked with Mr. Lauder and Mrs. Lauder, respectful, but I have a valid reason for being in that room too, So I think it's, I guess that's always given me confidence. But of course, being a woman and going through life and also in certain stages of your life, your confidence does get rocked due to hormones a lot of the time as well. But also that self-doubt, I am my worst critic.
How do you pull yourself back when you feel that inner critic coming out?
I think I rely on other people around me in the team to boost me or lift me out of that a little bit. Or I've started very much to look in the mirror, and I think most women look in the mirror and go, oh my God, I've got a wrinkle here, or they look at the bad things. Why not just smile at yourself in the mirror and say, look at that smile, So I've started to kind of lift my own energy, and, I practice yoga every day, which gives me an hour of self-reflection before the day starts. And I've just layered on gently the power. I don't think there's any, we're all at different stages of our life as females. And now, I've just turned 60, and I sort of plan my decades. And who I want to be and how I want to be, not necessarily what I want to do in those decades.
It sounds like you have a really strong sense of self.
Yes.
And that almost feels like whatever's going on, you know who you are.
Yes.
And actually that gives you that inner belief. That's sort of how it feels, which is an amazing, it's energizing to listen to it, to be honest. So you can see, you can see how you lead teams, because I'm like, God, she'd be a great boss.
I don't know. I'm pretty tough.
I can imagine that. Yeah. And thinking about work, like, how do you manage your work? So do you have a philosophy? We touched on it a bit earlier around that sense of, you can have great work-life balance. And I know I always say you have to make choices. And then how do you feel about when you talk about how you have previously and now managed your work life?
Okay, I don't think, I think it is a myth that is pushed down a lot of people's throats about work-life balance, and particularly young people. They come into the workplace, they want to, there are periods in your life when that just isn't going to happen. If you want a career, or if you want to make something really good, or if you want to be a brilliant mom and you choose to stay at home and be the best you can be, there's periods in your life where there is, I think, this idea of balance. I think you can choose. For me, I choose what can go at that point. Like when I was a single mom with really high-flying job in New York, Post-it note was my friend, on the fridges of things to do. But I was extremely disciplined. I decided I didn't want a partner, and I wanted to be the best I could be at work and the best of my ability to be a mum. And at first, I was spending all my salary on the nanny and my rent because I'd chosen to stay right slap bang in the middle of Manhattan where I could be 20 minutes away from my son. And I knew that if I spent money on a nanny, it would give me the freedom at work to grow and get on. So it's about, I think, where you focus your energy, what you're prepared to let go of at certain points in your life. And now I've decided I'm not going to be squeezed by any part of my life in my 60s.
Yeah.
So putting up boundaries and saying, no.
Yes. Do you think then it's not possible for a woman to have it all? We often hear about, you can have it all.
What's
but
your
is
all,
that,
though?
Exactly. But do you have to like you said then, you had to focus on being a mum and also your career.
Yeah.
And actually, other aspects of life had to take a bit of a backseat at that time.
That was me having it all. I lived in Manhattan. I had a beautiful son. I had the most amazing role that I loved.
Yeah.
That was me having it all, And now I've got it all in a different way.
Yes.
It's very stressful though in, when you have your own company versus, because that's omnipresent.
That responsibility for the employees.
That's
How
omnipresent.
do you deal with that stress? And have you been close to burnout before, or has that, ever caused an issue in your life?
Yes, yeah. I mean, different points in my life.
Yeah.
In my 40s, because I had my daughter at 41, I'd left my big job, and it was, it was a very difficult time. And mental health-wise, I did, burn slightly out then. And then I actually and I went on to medication because I couldn't kind of shift that. And then I decided I needed to take a big role because that is my safe space.
Yeah.
And then I became CEO of Saint-Tropez and turned that company around.
Yeah.
And my working life, I think, has saved me along the way. And now you cannot escape. I chose to step onto the platform of being a founder. So there are times when I would like to fire myself,
Jump off that platform.
But I've got an amazing 99% female team. We're a British company. We're doing amazing things. And that pride now keeps me, I have to keep stepping up and stepping in because I can see where it's going. And the fact I'm sitting here with you now and we're in Marks and Spencer's, and that strength keeps me going if I'm having a bad day.
Yeah.
How does it feel? I'm always just reacting to what you've just said when you said we're in M&S now, which obviously we're delighted you're in M&S. But actually, presumably, you work for businesses that are, well, I know you have, that are much bigger than M&S. So how does it feel different when you're kind of building your brand? Because actually, I can imagine a way it could be like, we're in M&S, so what? I've been in businesses much bigger than M&S. So does it feel really exciting?
No, it's huge for us. It's transformational. You have no idea. I apart from the fact my entire family now think I've arrived because we're in M&S,
Isn't your mum a big fan?
I'm thinking I've been to the Grammys and and I've been part of the Oscars and I've signed Mary J. Blige and I've travelled the world and I've worked with Bill Clinton, but now I'm in M&S. It's I've made it.
It's a marker.
But it's wonderful. I think it's a British company. We're British. It's big for us. It's transformational for a small-ish company. And to answer first of all, I have to have a lot of chutzpah to go into a room and say, look what I've done, and you need to have us as part of your, my heritage of who I am and what I've achieved has opened doors, without a doubt. But the hard thing is knowing you are better than some of the brands that you've worked for, but you haven't got the power. So much bigger companies have got multiple brands. So they can say, if you take this brand, we'll give you this brand. And they have the power and they have the organisation and they have the money. So you have to be super creative. You have to be really passionate. and you have to do things differently. So I think it's finding that way of doing it differently that the big boys won't be able to catch up for quite some time. So it's innovation, really.
Almost using your scale and the smaller scale as a complete advantage.
Yeah.
Yeah, being confident in that.
Yeah.
Having a career in the beauty industry in various guises, and obviously being a woman, did you ever find it hard yourself in terms of your, because you just touched on it, it made me think, did you ever find it hard with your own self-esteem? Because obviously there's kind of so much glamour and, you know, some of it real, some of it not, around how you look and how everyone behaves. And being in New York in the 90s must have been amazing.
Yeah, it was.
But at the same time, in an industry where how you look and how you present yourself is really important, how did you manage that? Did it never bother you, or was it just fun?
I believe that you should be presenting with your best foot forward, actually. And for me personally, it's part of my self-esteem armour is to have a great haircut, look the best you can be, no matter what. You know, I've been bigger, I've been smaller. You know, it's not about that. It's about being the best you can be and put your best foot forward. Yeah. And, you know, trust me, some nights, I was a bit like that movie One Fine Day, if you've ever seen it. But, you know, my son would have wet the bed twice and he was sleeping in the bed and I'd have got up and I'd have had to be in this high-powered, you know, multi-million-pound meeting looking great. But the suit can really save you. You know, you've got it on, whatever you've got underneath, you put your lipstick
on the shoulder, hidden.
Great fragrance.
Hard relating to
you know. So I think I've never, my self-esteem is something I constantly look. I have therapy. I'm constantly questioning, am I good enough? Am I good enough? But that's probably, again, part of my makeup. And I think I'm very happy to say, you know, I have a bad day or I lose belief sometimes. It has been hard going to a smaller, starting with your sleeves rolled up and your wares, you know, in a basket going and meeting with people. That energy that's taken to get to this point now is hard. So I'm not going to pretend to anybody that every day I'm in this fabulous mood, or self-esteem. I think most women, you're questioning. I think use the things around you. Use people that you want around you that help you boost that self-esteem or can give you that, you know.
Totally. Yeah, find your tribe as well. I think it's so important to have the right people around you, isn't it? Now, you've had obviously a hugely successful 40-plus years career, and you talked about just turning 60 and life going in decades.
Yeah.
So what is this next decade all about for you?
This is my sparkling 60s.
Oh, I love that.
Me too.
Yeah. I if I look back, you know, my 20s were the 80s in London, phenomenal, working for phenomenal women like Lynn Franks, and the 80s were phenomenal learning. I then up to move to New York at 1990 with my then boyfriend, he was a record producer. No plan, 600 quid. And built my own PR agency and then got headhunted into Lauder. And the 90s were New York. And then 2003 moved back to the UK. I've been here ever since. 40s I found really hard, actually. I found them quite a challenge. And
they are a transformative decade. I think that as well.
We have
think
significant
hormones
changes
as well.
Yeah.
And maybe you've just been doing something for a very long time.
Yeah. But my 60s, I've decided I'm not going to get squeezed by any part of my life. And I'm being really, really clear about my own boundaries and limitations. Because, of course, we've got parents, you know, you're at both ends a bit, aren't you, in your 50s and 60s
the caring
and stuff
for
like
parents
that.
becomes a growing concern.
Yeah. And I've just, we did a trip and I stayed an extra 5 days by myself in Vietnam.
Oh, amazing.
I gave myself that promise when I turned 60, I would spend in January sort of a week on my own with my own head to think about how I wanted to live the year. And it's not a list. I hate lists, you know, oh, I've got to do this. I don't mean a shopping list, but, you know, a list of things that women should be doing at certain ages. But I do give myself a sense of, it's non-negotiables, actually, in my 60s.
Is that just sort of knowing yourself better? And there's definitely a calmness to you as well, sort of, although of those.
It's my yoga this morning.
Yes. But
It's
again,
calmness, but I wouldn't want to
knowing
cross her.
that you need the yoga for an hour in
do.
the morning, that's a really big thing to learn about
I hang
yourself.
upside down on
And
ropes.
do you?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's brilliant. even when I was in my 1-bedroom apartment in New York with my son, you know, I carved out space. I think you have to choose, and you have to tell those people around you that you need what you need. I think we're always absorbed. Well, maybe I don't speak for all women, but I think women particularly are always going, oh yeah, I'll please this person, I'll do that. And sometimes you have to kick back and sort of say, no, you know what, guys? I'm not doing that. I need,
You're putting on the oxygen mask, isn't it?
I
On
think
yourself
so,
first.
actually.
Did you always find it easy to do that, or is that something you've got better at with age?
Oh, better at with age and choice, and, you know, and we talked about, you know, with your different roles in life, and, you know, whether I was working on the shop floor at Marks and Spencer's in my early
was your
days.
first job,
my
we should
first
say.
job, yeah. And, you know, I'm always really try and do the best I can do in that role. But knowing I can only do the best. You can't do beyond that. So I think we stretch ourselves tremendously, don't we?
Yeah.
If you were giving some advice to a female entrepreneur who was doing what you were doing, you know, 7-8 years
Don't
ago,
do it. No.
what would you say other than don't do it, which I know you don't mean?
Well, look, I think if I would have done too much homework about the space, the industry, I think there's two things. I'm pretty fearless, and also I think if I've got an idea, I will go for it and do it. I think I would always say, what have you got to lose? And if you're willing to lose that, then go for it. And I would say maybe go for it at a younger age when you haven't got maybe so much to contend with. Seek out some people that can actually give you a bit of advice. Whether you want to take that or not is your prerogative. Because if I'd have taken the advice, you know, I wouldn't have done it really, I think, because they'd have gone, oh, you know, look at all these brands, look at all these money they spend. But I had experience in other brands that had been the outliers. You know, Mac was an outlier. Bumble and Bumble, when I launched it, we did in recyclable packaging in 1993. So I'd kind of built my portfolio of... But I think as a young person that has an idea that wants to do it, just think, what am I willing to let go in order to do that? And I'd say go for it. And actually with TikTok and the internet, if you've got a good idea, you probably can make quite a good business out of it relatively easily now.
Because the access to the
Yeah.
market is so much lower. Effectively, the barriers are less in a way. Well, I bet it didn't always feel that way when you were starting with Floral Street.
No, not at all. But I didn't think about that. I don't think about barriers. I think about way forward. I'm a complete way forward person. I have down days, but what I mean is I'm always, if that doesn't work. But the other big piece of advice, not everything is going to work. And I tended to get hung up. I kept thinking I've made a mistake, and it wasn't. I had to kind of go, just let that go and move in a different direction. Yeah. So actually, probably that's my best advice for somebody starting. It's not going to be perfect. Some things are going to work and some things aren't. Don't dwell on the things that aren't working. Move quickly on, because you'll find another way.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Learned
Thanks for
so
asking
much
me.
from you.
No, totally.
Yeah, that was really fascinating, and I love how down to earth you are as well.
Oh,
Yes,
thanks.
for
Well, and just
amount
the
you've
energy.
achieved.
You can feel it even sat next to you. It's just very infectious. So it's been brilliant. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.